The galaxy was vast, infinite, and merciless. It stretched endlessly in all directions, a canvas of stars and nebulae that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Humanity, though young compared to some of its cosmic neighbors, had clawed its way into the interstellar arena with grit and ambition. Colonies dotted distant planets, trade routes crisscrossed through asteroid fields, and fleets patrolled the borders of human-controlled space. Yet for all their progress, humanity remained fragmented, divided by politics, greed, and pride. At the edge of this sprawling empire floated the Erebus, a relic from an era long past. To most, it was a joke, a warship so outdated that even museum curators would hesitate to display it. Its hull bore scars from battles fought decades ago, patched together with salvaged materials and makeshift repairs. Its engines groaned under the strain of every maneuver, and its weapon systems were laughably primitive compared to the sleek, cutting-edge vessels now dominating the fleet. But despite its flaws, or perhaps because of them, the Erebus retained a certain charm, at least to those who called it home. Captain Elias Varn stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. Once a celebrated tactician, he had been reduced to commanding this forgotten hulk after a scandal involving corrupt admirals and fabricated charges left him disgraced. His hair was streaked with gray, and lines etched deep into his face told stories of sleepless nights and bitter defeats. Yet there was fire in his eyes, a stubborn refusal to give up or fade away quietly. He wasn't just leading a crew. He was protecting a family. The crew of the Erebus was as mismatched as the ship itself. Some were veterans too old or broken to serve elsewhere. Others were outcasts, exiled from more prestigious postings due to mistakes or misconduct. A few were idealists drawn to the Erebus not out of loyalty but curiosity, wondering if legends about Captain Varn's brilliance might hold some truth. Among them was Lieutenant Mira Callan, the ship's chief engineer whose fiery temper matched her red hair. She had joined the Erebus fresh out of the academy when no one else would take her, determined to prove herself despite her checkered academic record. Then there was Ensign Theo Calder, a nervous young man whose fascination with alien cultures often got him into trouble during diplomatic missions. And finally, Commander Rhea Solis, Varn's second-in-command, whose dry wit masked a fierce intellect and unwavering dedication to the mission. Together, they formed a ragtag band united by shared purpose and mutual respect. They weren't heroes by any conventional measure, but they were survivors, and sometimes survival required more courage than glory ever could. On this particular day, the Erebus was cruising along the outer rim of human-controlled space, tasked with routine patrol duties. Such assignments were typically dull, reserved for ships deemed expendable enough not to matter if they stumbled upon trouble. But today felt different. There was an unease in the air, a tension that none of them could quite explain. Perhaps it was the eerie silence of the comms channel, devoid of chatter from nearby patrols. Or maybe it was the faint shimmer of light reflecting off distant debris, hinting at something unnatural lurking beyond the veil of normalcy. "Captain," Mira called from her station, her voice tinged with concern. "Sensors are picking up something. It's small, fast, and emitting strange energy signatures." Varn turned toward her, his brow furrowing. "Strange how?" "Not like anything we've seen before," she replied, tapping furiously at her console. "It doesn't match known designs for drones or probes. Whatever it is, it's moving erratically, almost like it's trying to evade detection." "Hail it," Varn ordered, leaning forward slightly. "Let's see if it responds." Theo, seated at communications, adjusted his headset and sent out a standard greeting signal. Seconds passed, then minutes, but there was no reply. Instead, the object continued weaving unpredictably, its trajectory taking it closer to the Erebus. "It's heading straight for us," Theo exclaimed, his voice rising an octave. "Should I activate defensive protocols?" "No," Varn said firmly. "Hold your position. If it wanted to attack, it would have done so already." As if to confirm his words, the object suddenly halted mere kilometers away from the ship. For a moment, everything seemed frozen in time. Then, without warning, the drone emitted a burst of blinding light and exploded, sending shock waves rippling through the void. The bridge erupted into chaos as alarms blared and consoles flashed red warnings. Mira swore loudly, frantically checking for damage reports while Theo scrambled to stabilize the ship's systems. Varn remained calm, his gaze fixed on the spot where the drone had vanished. "What the hell was that?" Rhea demanded, gripping the back of her chair tightly. "I don't know," Varn admitted, his tone grave. "But whatever it is, it's not natural. Someone, or something, is testing us." Over the next several hours, the crew analyzed fragments of the destroyed drone, piecing together what little information they could glean. What they discovered only deepened the mystery. The drone's design was unlike anything recorded in human databases, featuring alloys and technologies far beyond current capabilities. More troubling was the data stored within its memory core, encrypted messages containing coordinates pointing toward uncharted regions of space. When Varn transmitted his findings to command, however, the response was dismissive. Admiral Hallgren, a pompous bureaucrat notorious for valuing appearances over substance, dismissed the report as paranoia. "You're telling me a single malfunctioning drone warrants diverting resources?" he scoffed during their encrypted call. "Captain Varn, your reputation precedes you. Stick to your patrol route and leave real threats to the professionals." The insult stung, but Varn didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he ended the transmission with a curt nod and returned to the bridge. As he relayed the conversation to his crew, anger simmered beneath the surface. They knew better than anyone how easily arrogance could blind people to danger. Still, orders were orders, and the Erebus resumed its patrol, albeit with heightened vigilance. Days turned into weeks, and the initial excitement faded into monotony. Yet the memory of the drone lingered, gnawing at the edges of their thoughts. Rumors began circulating among other patrols about similar encounters, mysterious objects appearing briefly before disappearing without explanation. Each sighting added another piece to the puzzle, painting a picture of something vast and ominous lurking just beyond the horizon. Then came the news that changed everything. Reports poured in of entire colonies going dark, their communication networks severed, and defenses overwhelmed. Survivors spoke of shadowy figures descending from the skies, wielding weapons humanity couldn't comprehend. Panic spread like wildfire, and the Imperial fleet scrambled to respond. Ships were dispatched to investigate, but many never returned. Through it all, the Erebus remained sidelined, relegated to the fringes of the conflict. To the higher-ups, it was nothing more than a rust bucket best kept out of sight. But Captain Varn knew better. Deep down, he sensed that their time would come, and when it did, the Erebus would be ready. For now, though, they waited, watching as the galaxy teetered on the brink of catastrophe. The laughingstock of the fleet, ignored and underestimated, prepared silently for the storm ahead. The galaxy was no longer at peace. The once stable borders of human-controlled space were now riddled with cracks, as reports of mysterious attacks spread like wildfire. Entire colonies had been wiped out overnight, communications severed, defenses dismantled, and populations vanished without a trace. Survivors who managed to escape spoke of shadowy figures descending from the skies, wielding weapons that defied comprehension. Fear gripped the hearts of civilians and soldiers alike, but it wasn't just the unknown enemy that terrified them. It was the realization that humanity's greatest strength, its technological superiority, seemed utterly useless against this new threat. Back aboard the Erebus, Captain Elias Varn watched as the news feeds flickered across the bridge's main display. Each report painted a grim picture, yet none provided any concrete answers. The Imperial fleet had deployed its most advanced battleships to investigate, only for those ships to go dark as well. Whatever this enemy was, they were methodical, efficient, and devastatingly powerful. And still, the Erebus remained sidelined, dismissed as irrelevant by those in command. "Admiral Hallgren is an idiot," Lieutenant Mira Callan muttered under her breath, slamming her fist against her console in frustration. "If we'd acted sooner instead of sitting here twiddling our thumbs, maybe we could have stopped this before it escalated." Varn didn't respond immediately. He stood silently, his arms crossed over his chest, staring at the chaotic stream of data pouring in from across the sector. His expression was unreadable, but his mind raced with possibilities. The coordinates extracted from the drone weeks earlier pointed toward uncharted regions of space, a region where these attacks seemed to originate. It was too much of a coincidence to ignore, and yet the higher-ups refused to acknowledge it. "Mira," he said finally, turning to face her. "How are the upgrades coming along?" She hesitated, glancing down at her workstation. "Progress is slow, sir. We're retrofitting old tech with salvage parts, so nothing works quite how it should. But I think we can make it functional if we focus all our resources." "That's not good enough," Varn replied sharply. "We don't have time for functional. This ship needs to be ready for anything. Prioritize the EMP emitter and reflective armor plating. Everything else can wait." "Yes, sir," Mira said, nodding quickly. She turned back to her console, muttering something about impossible deadlines under her breath. As she worked, Ensign Theo Calder approached, cautiously holding a datapad in trembling hands. "Captain," he began nervously, "I've been analyzing the patterns of the attacks. They're consistent. Too consistent. Whoever or whatever is behind this is following a specific strategy. They're targeting key points along trade routes and supply lines, cutting off reinforcements before moving inward." Varn raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "Well," Theo continued, gaining confidence, "if we overlay the attack locations with the coordinates from the drone, they align almost perfectly. There's a central hub somewhere near the edge of known space, an epicenter of sorts. If we strike there, we might be able to disrupt their operations." Commander Rhea Solis, who had been listening quietly from her station, interjected. "Striking isn't exactly within our job description, Captain. Not unless Command decides to grow a spine and give us actual orders. Then perhaps it's time we took matters into our own hands," Varn said, his voice low but firm. "We may not have fancy weapons or shiny hulls, but we have something more valuable. Experience. And right now, experience tells me that waiting around won't do anyone any good." His words hung heavy in the air, met with stunned silence. For years, the crew of the Erebus had followed orders without question, knowing full well that defiance would mean the end of their careers, or worse. But desperation breeds boldness, and the situation had grown dire enough to warrant drastic measures. Over the next few days, the Erebus underwent a transformation unlike anything it had experienced before. Every available hand was put to work, stripping away unnecessary components and replacing them with makeshift upgrades. Mira led the effort, her fiery determination driving the crew forward even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. Under her guidance, the ship's outdated systems were rewired to accommodate experimental technology scavenged from derelict vessels over the years. The centerpiece of their efforts was the jury-rigged EMP emitter, a device designed to disable electronic systems within a limited radius. While not particularly sophisticated, it represented their best chance of countering the alien fleet's advanced weaponry. To complement it, reflective armor plating was installed along critical sections of the hull, intended to deflect energy-based attacks. It was crude, imperfect, and likely to fail under sustained assault, but it was better than nothing. Meanwhile, Theo pored over every scrap of intel he could find, piecing together a clearer picture of the enemy. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. The aliens weren't merely invaders. They were conquerors, systematically dismantling human infrastructure while avoiding direct confrontation whenever possible. Their ships were equipped with cloaking devices that rendered them invisible to conventional sensors, and their plasma cannons could vaporize entire squadrons in seconds. Worst of all, their tactics suggested a level of intelligence far beyond what humanity had encountered before. "They're learning," Theo reported during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "Every engagement teaches them more about our weaknesses. By the time we figure out how to fight back, they'll already be 10 steps ahead." Varn nodded thoughtfully. "Which means we need to hit them where they least expect it. Take the, fight to their doorstep." "But how?" Rhea asked, leaning forward in her chair. "Even with the upgrades, we're still outnumbered and outgunned. One ship can't possibly turn the tide." "One ship doesn't have to win the war," Varn countered. It just has to create enough chaos to buy the rest of the fleet some breathing room. Once we expose their vulnerabilities, others will follow. There was a long pause as the weight of his plan sank in. None of them doubted the danger. They were essentially volunteering for a suicide mission, but neither could they deny the necessity. If the Erebus failed, humanity might not get another chance. Their opportunity came sooner than expected. As rumors of the alien armada reached fever pitch, the Imperial fleet launched a desperate counteroffensive, sending its most formidable battleships to engage the enemy head-on. Among them was the Invincible Dawn, a state-of-the-art dreadnought, hailed as the pinnacle of human engineering. Its deployment was meant to inspire hope, a symbol of humanity's resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. But hope turned to despair within hours. Initial reports described the battle as a massacre. The alien fleet decimated the Imperial forces with ruthless efficiency, their cloaked ships appearing out of nowhere to unleash devastating barrages before vanishing again. Entire squadrons were wiped out in moments, leaving survivors scrambling to retreat. The Invincible Dawn itself was destroyed in a spectacular explosion, its shields collapsing under sustained fire from alien plasma cannons. When the call for reinforcements went out, the Erebus was among the first ships recalled. Not because it was needed, but because there was no one else left to send. Admiral Hallgren's disdainful tone returned as he issued the order, dismissing the Erebus as little more than cannon fodder. "You wanted to play hero, Varn? Here's your chance, don't disappoint me." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving behind a bitter taste. Varn clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Instead, he turned to his crew, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "This is it," he declared. "We've trained for this. We've prepared for this. Now it's time to show them why the Erebus deserves to be remembered." Cheers erupted throughout the bridge, a mix of fear and adrenaline fueling their resolve. For the first time in years, the crew felt truly alive, united by a shared purpose greater than themselves. As the ship set course for the heart of the conflict, they knew the odds were stacked against them. But they also knew one thing for certain: they wouldn't go down without a fight. The void of space stretched endlessly before the Erebus, a silent witness to humanity's desperation. As the ship approached the coordinates where the remnants of the Imperial fleet were regrouping, Captain Elias Varn stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the battlefield ahead. Debris floated aimlessly in the wake of destruction, twisted shards of metal, shattered hulls and frozen bodies drifting like ghostly echoes of lives lost. The once mighty armada that had set out to confront the alien menace now resembled a graveyard. "Status report," Varn commanded, his tone calm but firm. Lieutenant Mira Callan glanced up from her console, her expression grim. "We're picking up faint distress signals from a handful of surviving ships, but most are too damaged to respond. Scans show multiple alien vessels holding position near the debris field. They're cloaked, sir, but their energy signatures are unmistakable." Ensign Theo Calder chimed in, his voice trembling slightly. They're waiting for us, like predators circling wounded prey." Varn nodded slowly, absorbing the information. He had expected nothing less. The aliens were methodical, patient, and relentless, qualities that made them all the more dangerous. Yet even as despair threatened to creep into his thoughts, he reminded himself why they were here. The Erebus wasn't just another ship. It was a symbol of resilience, ingenuity, and defiance against overwhelming odds, and today it would prove its worth. "Commander Solis," Varn said, turning to Rhea. "Prepare the EMP emitter and reflective armor systems. I want every available resource focused on these upgrades. We'll only get one shot at this." "Aye, Captain," Rhea replied, already barking orders to the engineering team below decks. As preparations continued, Varn addressed the crew over the intercom. His voice carried a steadiness that belied the storm brewing inside him. "Listen, up everyone. What we're about to do won't be easy. In fact, it'll probably be the hardest thing any of us has ever faced. But remember this: we're not fighting for glory or recognition. We're fighting because no one else can. Today we show the galaxy what the Erebus is made of. Today we fight for survival." The response was immediate. A chorus of affirmations echoed through the ship, bolstering morale despite the dire circumstances. For the first time in years, the crew felt truly united, bound together by a shared purpose greater than themselves. It was a fragile unity, held together by threads of hope and determination, but it burned brightly against the encroaching darkness. When the Erebus finally entered the fray, it did so with calculated precision. Varn had devised a plan based on ancient naval tactics combined with insights gleaned from studying the alien drones. Rather than engaging the enemy head-on, the Erebus would use its speed and maneuverability to slip past their defenses and strike at their weakest point, the flagship. The alien fleet reacted almost instantly, their cloaked ships materializing around the Erebus like spectral apparitions. Plasma cannons roared to life, unleashing torrents of searing energy that lit up the void. Most of the shots missed, thanks to the erratic flight path plotted by Lieutenant Callan, but those that connected struck with terrifying force. The reflective armor absorbed much of the impact, redirecting the energy outward, but the strain on the ship's systems was evident. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, warning of structural damage and failing components. "Shields are holding for now," Mira reported, her fingers flying across her console as she rerouted power to critical systems. "But we can't take much more of this. Keep us steady," Varn ordered, gripping the edge of his command chair tightly. "Theo, lock onto their flagship. We need to disable it before they realize what we're doing." "I'm trying, sir," Theo shouted back, sweat beading on his forehead as he struggled to pinpoint the flagship's location amidst the chaos. "Got it, target locked. Fire the EMP emitter," Varn commanded. With a deafening hum, the jury-rigged device activated, releasing a pulse of electromagnetic energy that rippled outward like an invisible wave. For a brief moment, the alien fleet froze, their cloaking devices flickering and fading as their systems overloaded. The sudden exposure revealed dozens of sleek angular ships surrounding the massive flagship, a behemoth bristling with weapons and shield generators. "There!" Varn pointed to the flagship, his voice rising above the din. "Focus all remaining. Firepower on that target." The Erebus unleashed everything it had left, lasers, missiles, and even improvised projectiles crafted from salvaged materials. Each shot struck true, hammering away at the flagship's weakened shields until they collapsed entirely. A final barrage breached the hull, causing explosions that tore through the alien vessel's interior. Flames erupted from within, illuminating the void with a hellish glow as the flagship began to break apart. Panic spread among the remaining alien ships as their command structure crumbled. Without the flagship coordinating their movements, the once unstoppable fleet descended into disarray. Ships collided with one another, firing blindly in confusion while others attempted to flee. The tide of battle had turned. Not decisively, but enough to give the surviving human forces a fighting chance. Back aboard the Erebus, the victory came at a cost. The ship groaned under the weight of accumulated damage, its systems failing, one by one. Smoke filled the corridors and emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the battered interior. Despite the carnage, however, the crew remained resolute, working tirelessly to keep the ship operational. "We did it," Mira whispered, hoarsely, slumping back in her chair as relief washed over her. "We actually did it. For now," Rhea added cautiously, her gaze never leaving the monitors. "There are still plenty of them out there. This isn't over yet." "No," Varn agreed, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But we've bought ourselves some time and maybe a little respect." He turned to face his crew, pride swelling in his chest despite the grim reality of their situation. These men and women, once dismissed as misfits and failures, had risen to the occasion when it mattered most. They had proven that courage and ingenuity could overcome even the greatest odds. And though history might forget their names, their actions would echo through the stars. "Secure the ship," Varn ordered softly. "Patch up what you can and prepare for whatever comes next. We've earned this moment, but our work isn't done." As the crew scrambled to carry out his instructions, Varn allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He gazed out at the wreckage littering the battlefield, a somber reminder of the price paid for hubris and arrogance. Humanity had underestimated its enemies and itself, but perhaps, just perhaps, lessons had been learned. For now, the Erebus limped toward safety, its battered frame a testament to resilience in the face of annihilation. And somewhere deep, within its scarred hull, hope flickered like a stubborn flame, refusing to be extinguished. The aftermath of the battle was a grim tableau, a cosmic graveyard littered with the remnants of humanity's pride and folly. The once mighty Imperial fleet, which had set out with bravado and arrogance, now lay shattered among the stars. Only a handful of ships remained operational, their crews battered but alive thanks to the Erebus' daring gambit. Yet even as surviving officers scrambled to regroup and launch a counteroffensive against the alien armada, the true cost of the conflict weighed heavily on those who bore witness. For Captain Elias Varn and his crew, there was no time to rest. The Erebus, though victorious in its mission to cripple the alien flagship, was barely holding together. Its hull groaned under the strain of accumulated damage, its engines sputtered unpredictably, and critical systems flickered between functionality and failure. Emergency repairs kept the ship limping toward safety, but it was clear that the old warship wouldn't survive another engagement, not without extensive overhauls that none of them had the resources or time to perform. As they approached the Yao, nearest human outpost, a fortified space station orbiting a desolate moon, Varn stood silently on the bridge, watching the distant glow of the station grow larger. His mind replayed the events of the past hours, each memory etched with equal parts pride and sorrow. Pride for what his crew had accomplished against impossible odds, and sorrow for the lives lost and sacrifices made along the way. He knew that history would judge this day not by the actions of one ship, but by the collective failures and triumphs of humanity as a whole. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Erebus deserved better than to fade into obscurity. When the Erebus docked at the station, it was met with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Refugees and soldiers alike gathered around viewing ports, staring at the scarred vessel with expressions ranging from gratitude to incredulity. Word of the Erebus' role in turning the tide of battle had spread quickly, carried by fragmented transmissions from survivors who owed their lives to the ship's ingenuity and bravery. To many, the Erebus was no longer just a relic. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity could rise above itself. Yet recognition came with complications. As Varn and his senior officers debriefed with Station Command, they were greeted not with accolades but scrutiny. Admiral Hallgren, still clinging to his position despite the catastrophic losses suffered under his watch, dismissed the Erebus' achievements as mere luck. A stroke of fortune, he sneered during a tense video conference. Hardly worth celebrating. His words stung, but Varn refused to let them diminish the significance of what his crew had done. Instead, he countered calmly, "Luck played? A part, perhaps. But so did preparation, strategy, and the willingness to act when others hesitated. If you'd listened earlier, Admiral, we might have avoided much of this devastation." Hallgren bristled visibly but said nothing more, cutting the transmission abruptly. It was a small victory, but one that resonated deeply with the crew. They may not receive official commendations, but their actions spoke louder than any medal ever could. In the days that followed, the station became a hub of activity as reinforcements poured in from across human-controlled space. Survivors of the initial assault shared harrowing tales of the alien fleet's power, fueling both fear and determination among those preparing for the next phase of the war. Meanwhile, engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged ships and retrofit others with lessons learned from the Erebus' improvised upgrades. The EMP emitter and reflective armor plating, once dismissed as impractical, were now being replicated and installed wherever possible. Amid the chaos, whispers about the Erebus began to circulate. Stories of its daring maneuver through enemy lines, its ingenious use of outdated technology, and its pivotal role in crippling the alien flagship spread like wildfire. Some hailed the ship as a hero, while others saw it as proof that humanity's greatest strengths lay not in flashy advancements but in adaptability and resilience. For every person who doubted its value, There were two more inspired by its example. Captain Varn found himself reflecting on these stories during quiet moments aboard the ship. He walked the corridors listening to the hum of strained systems and the occasional burst of laughter from weary crew members. Each sound reminded him of how far they'd come and how fragile their existence truly was. Despite everything, the Erebus remained a patchwork of salvaged parts and stubborn determination, held together by the sheer will of those who called it home. One evening, as the station's artificial lights dimmed to simulate night, Varn joined Lieutenant Mira Callan and Commander Rhea Solis in the mess hall. The three sat around a small table, sharing a meal of rehydrated rations and lukewarm coffee. Conversation flowed freely, touching on topics ranging from future repairs to personal aspirations. "You know," Mira said after a long pause, her voice tinged with wistfulness, "I used to dream of serving on one of those fancy new cruisers, something sleek and shiny with all the latest tech. But now, I wouldn't trade this hunk of junk for anything." Rhea chuckled softly, raising her mug in mock salute. "Here's to the Erebus. May she keep surprising us until the bitter end." Varn smiled faintly, his gaze drifting toward the viewport overlooking the station's bustling docks. Beyond the glass, countless ships prepared for departure, their crews fueled by renewed purpose. Somewhere among them, the legacy of the Erebus lived on, not in grand monuments or official records, but in the hearts and minds of those it had inspired. When the time came to depart, the Erebus received orders to return to patrol duty along the outer rim. It was a thankless assignment, far removed from the front lines where glory awaited. Yet none of the crew complained. They understood that their place wasn't among the celebrated heroes. It was among the forgotten ones who did what needed to be done, regardless of recognition. As the ship disengaged from the station and drifted back into the void, Varn addressed the crew one final time. His voice carried a quiet resolve, echoing through the battered corridors like a promise. "We've been underestimated our entire lives," he began, pausing to let his words sink in. "But today, we proved that strength isn't measured by size or firepower. It's measured by heart, by courage, by refusing to give up, no matter how bleak things seem. The galaxy may never remember our names, but they'll feel the impact of what we've done. That's enough for me, and I hope it's enough for all of you." Cheers erupted throughout the ship, spontaneous and heartfelt. For a moment, the weight of their struggles lifted, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and belonging. They were misfits, outcasts, and rejects, but together, they were something greater. The Erebus disappeared into the stars, its journey continuing as it always had, quietly, resolutely, and unyieldingly. Though its name might fade from history books, its spirit endured, in the hearts of those who dared to believe, and in the endless expanse of space where legends are born. And somewhere, deep within the void, the echoes of its triumph whispered, to anyone willing to listen, "Never underestimate the ship they mocked.